Today, we have a lot to react to. Recently, Tucker Carlson on his internationally known podcast, with massive audiences, talked to a sitting member of Congress, Tim Burchett, and we are going to react to what they are saying about underwater UAPs and what these possible entities might be with our special guest and expert in the area, L.A. Marzulli. L.A., thank you so much for joining us today as we explore these topics that are making headline news and massive audiences are hearing about it. But at the same time, it seems like nobody's really paying it much mind or much attention, even though over 1 million people have now seen this video of the interview between them.
Yeah, what amazes me, especially in Christian circles, is the apathy and the, oh, well, what does that have to do with Jesus? And I get it. Meanwhile, this thing just keeps, the ball keeps moving down the field, and people need to start waking up and understanding that this is the coming great deception. And now that the fact is that the halls of Congress are discussing this on a weekly or biweekly level, and whatever they're doing. It's a dog and pony show for the most part. As a ufologist, and I've been one for decades, well over 40 years now, this is the coming great deception. That's a phrase I coined in the very first book, Nephilim. It was a novel published by Zondervan, came out in 1999. So that's, it's 26, 27 years ago. And that's based on a lot of research. But the Christian church needs to understand, in the words of Jesus, men faint from fear from what is coming upon the earth. So let's just walk through that. What is that? What can it possibly mean? Men faint from fear from what is coming upon the earth. So it's not coming from underneath it, it's coming from above. So even though we're talking about UAPs, they zip around, they do stuff that are physically impossible because they're bending space and time. When they're underwater, they're still bending space and time. That's why they can move at 200 miles an hour, because there is no friction. That's why when above out of the water, they can move at 90-degree turns because they're bending space and time. So Jesus warns us, it'll be like the days of Noah. That's a 3-hour discussion. But circling back into that one little scripture that he says, men faint from fear from what is upon the earth. So let's walk through it. What is he talking about? It's cloaked. We don't know specifically. We can't sit down with Jesus and go, Jesus, what do you mean by that? And those are one of the scriptures where you would go, can somebody please ask him to elaborate on that? And of course they don't. So someone like me looks at this 2,000 years later, okay, let's walk through it. It could be a comet, it could be an asteroid, or it could be a mile-wide UFO craft. What's manifesting now is our mile-wide UFO crafts everywhere. I mean, people are seeing these things all over the map, all over the globe. So if it wasn't that, I'd be looking for, well, what else is coming? So men faint from fear of what is coming upon the earth. These craft come from another dimension. Therefore, they are coming upon the earth. So the church really has two positions here. We can keep, and I say we because I'm part of a church, we can keep hiding our heads in the sand and not looking at the phenomena, not addressing the phenomena, and be ignorant and arrogant and never warn the people, or we can write books like Rungs of Disclosure, which Charisma Media published, and I thank God that they did, which talks about the first rung on the ladder of disclosure. We are now up to rung number 23. The book, I think, has 17 or 18 rungs, so we're up to rung 23. It's an interactive website, rungsofdisclosure.com. You can go there. I do a video on every new rung that's there, that's not in the book. And on the next printing, we're going to have a QR code. So you just go click on the QR code and you can go right to the site and see all the latest rungs. But we are definitely climbing the ladder towards full disclosure. There's no doubt about it. And this is the game changer. I did a presentation, and I'll end by saying this, at Prophecy Watchers this year. How do we get to a new, to a global government, a one-world religious system? This is how you do it. You have a nuclear event go off anywhere on the planet. They show up Oh, we created all life on this planet. We started the world's religions. We genetically manipulated early man. Now at this critical juncture, we're back to usher mankind into a golden age. So 50 years ago, when I'm 25 years old, essentially, this is the paradigm that I believed in, that the space brothers were going to come, that we were genetically manipulated by these, Anunnaki or whatever, just insert any new age, our space brothers. And that's what I believe. That was the paradigm I held to until I became a Christian at 30 years old. And then the Lord began to rewire everything. And then it was 10 years of Bible study. And then at 40, he said, let's go back and look at all this stuff. And I had no idea that he would, raise me up into the position that I am now. This is why, when you read the book of Revelation and all the elders, they're throwing their crowns. You read that as a new Christian, go, this is really weird. Why are they doing that? Well, having walked with him for 45 years, I totally get it. Because anything that we've done with the 33 films and the 15 books, the 15th one coming out by Charisma, The Waiting Room, all the glories to him. I mean, yes, I'm suited for what I do, but he created me to do this. And I remember my first mentor, Wayne Kendall, used to say that, the Lord will throw you the football, play catch, but you got to throw it back. If you hold on to it, then that's it. He can't play. You're not playing catch with him anymore. And unfortunately, there are ministries that tenaciously hold on to what the Lord has given them and never throw the ball back. Man, I throw that ball back as fast as I can when he gives it to me. So glory to the King. This is the coming great deception. This is part of it. The church needs to address it at some level. And you know what? If your pastor is not addressing it, I've kind of softened my tone. I used to say, maybe you should try to find another church. I get that. And in some ways, that's a little harsh, because there's a lot of great pastors out there. Need to pray for our pastors, pray that their eyes would be opened to see what's going on, maybe give them rungs of disclosure. We have 10 films on the UFO phenomena. There are some people, there are some well-meaning pastors out there that don't want to address it and say, what does this have to do with Jesus? And this is why we started Men Faint for Fearful is coming upon the earth. Even the elect would be deceived if that were possible. Satan comes with all signs and lying wonders. Folks, if we are in the last days, and Israel is our prophetic timepiece, and I believe we are in the last days, then, it's time to wake up and understand that it's here. It's not coming, it's here. And we need to address it and not wait till, they show up and let's say the church is still here. When full disclosure happens, now what? So those are some thoughts.
Right. And for so long, the church has dismissed it as fringe, conspiratorial, not real. They said this is just stuff made up from kooky, crazy people. But now we have one of the largest podcasters on the planet, a sitting member of Congress, and their massive audiences, not to mention the countless congressional hearings, reporting on this very event. And so we're going to go ahead and take a look, and I'm going to stop it real quick because you actually address what Tucker Carlson says in the first 10 seconds of the podcast in your book, Rungs of Disclosure. So let's see what he has to say real quick, and I'll stop it, and then we will see what else they have to say without, constantly interrupting to make points and everything on mine, because I could hit this button over and over and over again to keep talking about it. So let's see what Tucker opens with.
Thank you, Congressman, for doing this. I never talk about UFOs.
Tim.
Thank you, Tim. Never talk about UFOs. We don't do shows on UFOs, UAPs, whatever they're calling them, these mysterious lights, these objects.
So right there, and having read Rungs of Disclosure and the receipts that you bring in the book, we know, and people can go back, they can find the videos of it back when Tucker Carlson was on Fox News, the #1 cable news channel in the world, and his program was #1 for a time. He took Bill O'Reilly's spot. He did address UFOs and UAPs. In fact, it could be argued that he is the one who broke this phenomenon. Can you tell me how this came to be, of Tucker being the one who started discussing these events?
Yeah, with all due respect to Tucker, in my opinion, it was 2017, December, and I'm watching Tucker Carlson, and all of a sudden he basically says, UFOs used to be the stuff of, I'm paraphrasing here, but UFOs used to be the stuff of conspiracy theory, and tinfoil hat wearing people, but maybe we shouldn't think that anymore. Commander David Fravor joins us tonight, who's a former F-18 pilot. He had an encounter over the Pacific Ocean. Commander Fravor, thanks for joining us. And there's Commander Fravor. So you have Tucker here, Fravor in the middle, and over here you've got which at one time was classified information of the tic-tac shaped UFO. They also show the gimbal. They show two of them. And, you know, the information goes, the interview goes for about 5 minutes. It's a Friday night. It's the last segment of the show. That's deliberate. It's all deliberate, in my opinion. Last segment of the show, Friday night. And Tucker Carlson, the bottom line is this. In your opinion, what was this that you saw? And Commander David Fravor, the best of the best of the best, F-18 pilot. This guy's Mr. Stand-Up guy all day long. He looks right at the camera and says, whatever this was not from this earth. Now that's the first, that's the nexus for the entire book, Rungs of Disclosure. That's when the Lord went, hello, time to write a book. It's called Rungs of Disclosure. And so I did. And the rest is history. And thank you, Charisma Media, for publishing it. But that's the very first rung. So for Tucker to come up and say something like this, that he's not interested in UFOs or UAPs or whatever they're called, you know, I don't know how he can say that. You know, I would just, if I were there, I would go, well, what about this? Click, and here's Tucker talking to Commander David Fravor. But after that, there was Luis Elizondo, there was Christopher Mellon. All these guys are part of ATIP, which then later became AARO. ATIP is Advanced Aeronautical Threat Identification Program, headed by Luis Elizondo. And, you know, so he had two guys talking about cattle mutilations on the show. I mean, this became many of the rungs of disclosure in the book. And then after he left, you know, now we're on rung number 23, which is talking about women who were impregnated by them still maintain DNA fingerprints of the hybrid entity in their wombs and their DNA. And we're thinking about doing this. We have a woman who was abducted and impregnated by them 3 times. So we're actually thinking about getting blood drawn from her and then doing the DNA on it and then you know, showing those results. Mm-hmm. So go ahead.
Yeah, and it just, the first thing that comes to my mind, you know, like you said, this has happened on your show to Mr. Carlson, and we don't want to be attacking. I'm not attacking Tucker, but it shows me that we really need biblical discernment for the days that we're living in, because it's so important to not take anything at face value, but to compare it to the Word of God. That is the ultimate source of truth in this universe, in this galaxy that we are seeing, and to have that filling of the Holy Spirit and you know, that's, I believe, you know, the Lord probably had us catch this first thing, be like, we need to test the Spirit that all these words are being given in. And so, like you said, let's see then what else they address in more than the first 10 seconds of the video.
Because I know for a dead certain fact that there is an ongoing 70-year ongoing disinformation campaign by the U.S. government to sow confusion. Some people participating in that effort, I don't think they know they're participating in the effort, but they are nevertheless selling lies in an effort to get people off the trail of what this really is. There is something going on. What is it? It's so hard to know. You're one of the few people, from my perspective, who seems sincere. You're also informed as a member of Congress. And so I'm just grateful that you're doing this because I think you're going to be telling the truth. So what are these things?
And so he's introducing Congressional member, Republican from Tennessee, Tim Burchett, who we'll get to in just a moment after, you know, we get past his intro for the podcast. When it comes to congressional members, I know for myself, LA, and a lot of others, regardless if they say they're Christian or not, you know, some people might not know of Tim Burchett. He has been very outspoken on conservative issues and Christian issues as well. You know, there's a lot of distrust there when any member of Congress, and do you think we can get the truth when we're about to hear what Mr. Burchett has to say? Is Congress really a place that we're going to get the truth from? Because I know there's a lot of us who want to believe, like, this person says they're a Christian. I want to believe what they're saying. How should they approach getting news about subject matter like this from government officials.
Well, in my opinion, the congressional hearings have been, it's a step in the right direction, but for the most part, it's a dog and pony show. And the favorite saying, I think we should meet in a skiff, which, is a secure communication room that you can't hack. And I get that. So we hear that over and over and over again. The needle never moves. Now, number 22 rung on the ladder of disclosure was a congressional hearing. I forget the name of the congressman who showed the video, but he's showing a video and the UFO comes into the frame like this, and it's traveling above the water, I believe, and it's going like this. And all of a sudden we see a Hellfire missile shoot at it, coming at it, and the Hellfire missile hits it, but nothing explodes except the Hellfire missile. So how was that? How is that? And they call it an orb, but is it an orb, or are what we're looking at when the UFO is moving through time and space, it's letting off the light? And that's, in my opinion, it's the latter. It's not it's an orb. It appears as an orb, but there's a physical craft within that ball, that sphere of light. So the Hellfire missile just disintegrates off of it. How is that done? Right? I mean, think about that. And that's rung number 22 in the ladder of disclosure in Congress. As a ufologist, this is all old news. I mean, it's all old news. So Nancy Mace said something which I found really interesting. She said, I want the bodies brought here right now and displayed in front of Congress. Of course, that's never going to happen. And I've said this publicly. I'll say it again. If Congress and our present administration under President Trump, want to get to the bottom of it, you get 500 of the best of the best of the best. You get SEAL Team 6, you get the Marines, you get the whole crew. You split them up. 250 of them embedded with congressmen, congresswomen, and photographers and parts of the media go to Wright-Patterson Field with a decree from the president. The other 250 fly into Area 51 with the same decree from the president. Open up the doors. This is a presidential order. We want to see everything. All the hidden floors, all the hidden stuff, we want everything. It's the only way we're going to get to the truth. Why? Because there's a hidden history. There's a hidden government within our government. Arrow is a perfect example of this. So ATIP came out. They started revealing all this stuff. So ATIP closes down. They have this new organization called Arrow. And Anna Paulina Luna called I forget the guy's name. His name slips me for the time being, but the head of Arrow, she called him, Anna Paulina Luna, called him a liar, right in the congressional record, right on the record. The man is a liar, and he is, because, in my opinion, because he's saying something that there's no evidence of UFOs. Excuse me, it's all over the map. When you get a whistleblower like David Grush appearing in the halls of Congress and stating on the record, when Representative Nancy Mace asked him, Mr. Grush, do we have crash craft? And he says, I've already discussed that in my News Nation briefing, my News Nation interview. Well, then Nancy Mace follows up, well, do we have the pilots from these crash craft? And David Grush looks right up at her. Yes, we have recovered. We have recovered biologics, is his term, biologics from these craft. And she follows up again. Well, are these biologics human or non-human? Grush looks right up at her. Non-human biologics. That's rung number 17 in the book, the ladder of the rungs of disclosure. And this is what, the fact, is this guy just making this up? No, he's not. And this is why the whistleblowers are being threatened and being pushed back. Pushed back by whom? There's your deep state. There's your shadow government. They have run this program for decades, since the Roswell crash. We have a film on Roswell. We have 10 films on the whole UFO phenomena. Close Encounters of the First, Second, Third, and Fourth Kind, the abduction phenomena, cattle mutilations, 2 films on Roswell, a film on crop circles. Finally, what does it all mean? We sat down with Nick Pope. Nick, what do you think is going on? George Norrie. George, what do you think is going on here? Gary Stearman and others. So both sides of the aisle, and leave it up to the viewer. But the 2 films on Roswell, that's 1947, is the springboard into the whole modern day UFO phenomena. And I went to the debris field. Actually, I don't have it on me, but I could show it to you. It's in my next room. If you want to pause, I can go get it. But we found a piece of metal from a debris field. in Roswell. We went to the debris fields out in the middle of nowhere. All the naysayers, oh, it's a Nazi experimental craft. That's this, that's that. It was a weather balloon. Excuse me. Why don't you go out to the debris field and stop, flapping your jaws and go do some real research? We can all go to the library and read what other people have written. Let's go to the debris field and make history. And we did. According to Chuck Zukowski, our friend who was there, one of our guides, Frank Kimbler was the other guide, they took us out to the debris field. Frank had been out there numerous times, well over 30 times, and Chuck had been out there before. It is in the middle of nowhere. You would never find it. If you didn't know where it was, you'd never find it. Sorry, not going to find it. It's remote. There's no building for miles. You can't see anything. It's just all open range cattle mutilation. Free range. That's what I said. Free range cattle. That's what's out there. Not cattle mutilations, but there are mutilations out there too.
Right. All right. So, Let's see what else they have to say, because it seems like Congress is slowly catching up to the point that you've been at for a long time now.
Well, I don't know. I think there's a lot of different misconceptions about them. I kind of came into it organically, I guess. I had pretty cool parents. They would just take me to the library and just let me stay. Or I'd ride my bike over and stay a couple hours. I grew up in the 70s in Tennessee. And, I guess now you'd probably be taken to DCS or something for that. But, I went in there and I can remember there was a stack of books on a thing and, they had all the, something on maybe the occult or something like that. And then Bigfoot. And then there's something on UFOs. And I picked up the UFO book, started reading about it. And it just fascinated me. And I read the Bible. I'm a Christian. I'm not a very good one, obviously, by my chosen profession. But, the Bible talks about Ezekiel saw the wheel. And people always say, well, that was a dream. They always try to over-explain things in the Bible. And I just think it's written for simple folks like me. And
I agree with that.
And it was a translation, though. And at the time, the most technologically advanced item that they had was a wheel. And it describes a wheel within a wheel.
Exactly.
And it describes a landing gear and all these other things that we would today say are modern day flying saucers.
And so right there, LA, he goes right into it. Just a man who says, I'm just a Christian from Tennessee. I picked up a book in the library, which you just mentioned. Some people just start in the library. You start in the field looking for the proof, looking for the research. What is a good way for a Christian who, like he said, it's in the book of Ezekiel, a wheel within a wheel that matches a lot of descriptions of what we see of flying saucers and UFOs since the Roswell incident. How does a Christian even start this process of discerning and understanding that the Bible, which, like we've previously mentioned, pastors aren't talking about this. How do they step off into understanding this subject matter from the biblical perspective?
Well, the Ezekiel chapter is always interesting, and you can go there. But if you really want to get into it, go to 2 Kings chapter 6, where Elisha and his servant Gehazi are completely surrounded by the Syrian army. That's not a good thing. And Gehazi's figuring, oh, we're all toast, we're going to die. And Elisha says, Lord, open his eyes. So he boots Gehazi out of a tent. Gehazi goes out there and he looks. What does he see? And it's written right there. I looked up and I saw chariots of fire over the Syrian army. What is a chariot of fire? What is the writer trying to tell us? Go back thousands of years. There are no electric lights. They have torches, right? They have fire. That's it. That's all they have. What is the mode of transportation? A chariot. So what is Gehazi trying to say? It's above the Syrian army. A chariot of fire? It's a UFO. And there's more than one of them. And those are the good guys. And that I'm working on a book. It's called Supernatural Technology in the Bible, because it's all throughout the biblical narrative. We have a very truncated view of the Bible. And so when we come to a chapter like 2 Kings chapter 6, we go, well, that must be allegory. Well, that must be, we despiritualize it. And, or we make it something allegorical or something that's, well, we really don't know what he saw. Excuse me, what is a chariot of fire? I mean, if we were it's just like the Fatima, if I can digress for a second. It's like the Fatima apparitions. When you get there, I looked up and saw a dull silver disc. Well, what the heck is a dull silver disc? That's a modern day UFO, a dull silver disc. That's what the witnesses saw. But it's all clothed and repackaged, and it was Mary of the Bible, and it was the sun that was spinning and all this. It was not. It was a UFO event. We have 2 films on the Fatima apparitions. So, this is like a deep dive for me. And again, the Lord has directed my steps to do all this. We're exposing the deception of the prince of the power of the air and heralding the return of the King Jesus. That's our mission statement, to expose the deception of the prince of the power of the air. And we do that. We do a show every single day on YouTube. That's what we do constantly. So, Tim Burchett, citing the Ezekiel chapter 1, when he sees this thing coming at him, I mean, this thing, God the Father is having fun, and he's riding on this thing, and it's part machine, part living. How does that work? But those of us in ufology, those of us who have studied the phenomena, some of these crafts seem to be alive on some level. So look, I don't have all the answers, but nobody does either. And there you go.
All right. I think that's a pretty great explanation of where somebody can get another example. And I think you really hit the nail on the head of there seems to be an active removal of the supernatural, the spiritual from a lot of what's being taught, almost like it's on purpose because the enemy, the devil, doesn't want us to engage in this spiritual warfare. He wants a free and clear path to the end times. But as we all know, we're called to do battle in the spiritual realm. So let's go ahead and dive a little deeper into their conversation.
Pretty specific, and it's the Ezekiel passage you're referring to is it's not just like a parenthetical note. It's like a whole description.
Oh yeah, he goes into it. He describes, I think, the landing gear.
We're going to go to the section where they're specifically addressing now the UAPs discovered in the oceans of the earth that they're discussing, these craft. In the depths of the seas and everything. So that's where we're going to head up next.
But you don't believe it. You don't think this is our technology.
No, I do not. There's no way it is no way it's our technology. There's, I've talked to too many pilots. Why would we risk our best? I mean, I've talked to the best, Tucker, I've talked to the best pilots in the world that are ours. Some of them, not all of them, and that have told me. I mean, one guy, I remember I was at the Capitol Hill Club. It was just an unusual encounter. A guy spoke to a group, and he followed me out and said, Tim, or Congressman or whatever, he said that thing was 14 feet. He went like this from my canopy. And I thought to myself, why didn't he say 15? Why didn't he say 20? But he said 14. And then he said, this thing, it wasn't ours. He said, I don't know what it was, but it wasn't ours. And that's all he said. And I had a very high-ranking member of the Navy describe some underwater experiences they'd had with something that was doing 200 miles. And the best thing we got is probably 40. It
was doing 200 miles an hour underwater.
Underwater, big as a football field. And that's no fish.
So that right there, they talk about aerial encounters, 14 feet right in front of you. If just waving, and these are the best of the best pilots in the United States military. You have one of the top podcasters in the world and a sitting congressman talking about now they're not just being seen in the skies, they're being seen in the depths, the size of a football field, moving at 200 miles an hour. And you briefly addressed how that's even remotely possible earlier. Can you go a little more on just with some people who can't wrap their mind around the topic that's being discussed right now about how that's possible?
Well, and we talk about this in our films and books and everything else. These entities manipulate space, time, matter, and energy in ways that defy our physics. So they're still in the laws of physics, but they're able to defy our physics. So you say, well, how does that work, LA? Well, I don't have all the answers, but we have an example of it in the biblical prophetic narrative. Here's the example, all right? There's a man that's chained to a jail, to the walls of a jail cell. He's chained, all right? This entity comes through the wall, and there are other people in the jail cell, but they are falling asleep somehow. But this one man that this entity wants is awake, and the chains fall off. And then the entity says, get your things. And the man goes, not his account is, I'm not sure whether I'm awake or dreaming. We call that UFO brain fog. The prison door opens by itself. This entity is not fumbling with a skeleton key. The prison door opens by itself. He's manipulating space, time, matter, and energy. All the guards which are lined in the hallway, they're all falling asleep. How does that happen? They get to the end of the hallway, prison door opens, this prisoner is now free. So when I talk about that at UFO conferences, and I'm never invited anymore because of my Christian underpinnings, which is fine. But believe what you want to believe, folks. I'll tell them what you just heard was Peter's jailbreak. That's in the Bible. And that's a good guy. So the good guys come in, they manipulate space, time, matter, and energy. Well, when you're abducted, the bad guys come in and they manipulate space, time, matter, and energy. You're floating off the bed. You go through the wall, through the window, up to the ceiling, because they can do that. It's not demonic delusion, as some well-meaning Christian authors tend. I completely disagree with them. And I just gave you why there's biblical precedent for it. So you can tap dance around that. Explain that to me first before you tell me it's all demonic delusion, because it's not. People are physically taken. They are physically impregnated. Then in the third month, they are physically taken again. And that child, that hybrid fetus, is removed from them. We have a whole film on the abduction phenomenon. It's the deep end of the pool. Here's something to think about. In the book of Revelation, the Lord tells us that all the seas will be dried up. There'll be no more sea anymore. Why is that? Why is there no more sea? Is it because there are vast cities underneath the oceans that we know nothing about? And these are the bases for these UFO craft. These are where the abductees are taken. And, we don't know. But wouldn't it be interesting when the Lord dries up the sea and we all go in there and we go, look, they're the ancient ruins that have been there for thousands and thousands of years. This is the handiwork of the fallen ones. That's conjecture. But, I think I'm connecting some dots.
Absolutely. And you come at it, I think, in a great way from the biblical precedent, but then you also have the apocryphal writings from a historical context, not as scripture. We always say we do not take the book of Enoch as scripture, but it has historical references in it that back up and align with the biblical narrative, such as these fallen angels coming down, the sons of God, impregnating the women of mankind, but also we read how they gave forbidden knowledge, heavenly knowledge that mankind didn't fully understand. They don't break the laws of nature or the laws of God, because God is our creator and he set forth these laws in motion, but they have a deeper and greater understanding than we do. And we see, like you said, that interdimensional, but, going back and forth from what many just, I don't want to argue the semantics of anything, but between like a spiritual and physical realm, but just a greater understanding perhaps of the laws of physics that we fully don't comprehend yet. We are, so finite in our knowledge and wisdom and everything. We're not God. We don't understand his creation the way he does. So I've never heard the story of Peter explained that way. So we'll go ahead and continue with what they're discussing now beneath the waves.
Is it possible, given our current understanding of physics, for any man-made machine to go anywhere near 200 miles an hour underwater?
Not with our technology, no. The best we have is probably in the high 30s. And he was converting it. Of course, knots is what the Navy guys would do, but there's nothing.
If I fire a 30-06 or any high-caliber rifle underwater, it doesn't go 200 miles an hour. I can probably catch it in the length of a swimming pool or so.
Yeah, or it just falls down.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, it's like...
So we've got, and this was described to me in areas, and I was quoted on some. I was just all I do is quote people that have knowledge. But this was one that was he was talking about. There are 5 or 6, I think, deep water areas of the ocean. You've traveled a lot. I have not. There's not a lot of deep water areas around East Tennessee at Fort Loudon Lake or anything, but you're talking miles deep. And, of course, you've heard this before. We know more about the surface of the moon than we do the surface of the ocean. And he said these are areas where we see a high propensity of these UFOs. And there was a case where it was fairly well documented. They had multiple sightings. They were doing maneuvers and had the ships or boats, whatever you want to call them out there. I'm not a Navy guy. And and there was the sighting in the air, and the pilots radioed back and said, "Hey, is there something going on? Is there another operation? We got some secret technology stuff we're working on." I said, "We don't have any." And they, Pentagon, nobody knew about anything. And they pulled it back. And then they pulled everything back, scrubbed the mission. And then the next day, all their internet traffic had been scrubbed. But this guy was kind of a wonk, and he'd made copies of it. But the point I have there is, why would we risk multi-million-dollar apparatus? And why would we put something in the air around our best pilots that could have a crash? Because these guys are talking about there's actually, they've come close to collisions. Why would they do that? They would not do that.
No.
That would.
Okay, so in all of your research, in all of your experience in the field, studying these things, looking at the biblical records, the historic records, being in the field, why would they? Are you able to answer the question that he has? Like, why are we here? They know about these things, but you've also mentioned the push to continue to hide, to scrub, like he said, any evidence that this even happened. Why on earth do they keep trying to hide these things that are so very clearly here?
I think they're terrified. I think this is the old school thought. It's just like Roswell. So when Roswell happened in 1947, right, the very first paper that came out of the Roswell Daily, Army Air Force recovers flying saucer. I mean, that's it. I have a copy of it in my studio back in California. I'm in an undisclosed location, obviously near the ocean. Yeah, baby, on vacation. But that was July 8th. Well, July 9th, 1947, they redacted it. General Ramey, empty saucer, says excitement not justified. This is where the whole weather balloon story is concocted. They had a moment in time in 1947 to tell the American people the truth, and they didn't. This begins the decades of deliberate cover-up. We know for an absolute fact that the bodies and the craft was taken to Wright-Patterson Field. How many witnesses do we need to hear? In our films, we talk about this. In our film, we interviewed Jim and Carolyn Rankin. They're both pastors who was taking care of this man called Colonel Hill. Colonel Hill was in World War II. He had like 3 different degrees. He spoke 5 different languages. He was flown to Roswell the day after to try to communicate with one of the so-called aliens that was still alive. So, and it's a deathbed confession. A month later, he's dead. So it's a deathbed confession by Jim and Carolyn. They were there. They heard the story, and they elaborated on it in a sit-down interview with him. So this was deliberate. They had a chance. They got it right the first time. And then the powers that be came in. They made Jesse Marcel the scapegoat. And remember, this is the 509th Bombing Group. This is and Jesse Marcel Sr., he's the intelligence officer. Folks, this is not Elmer Fudd. This is somebody who's highly trained, knows exactly what's in the air from everybody, what the Germans have, what the Chi-Coms have, what the Russians have. He knows. That's his job. And to think that he's going to go out to the debris field in Roswell and mistake a weather balloon for... it ain't going to happen. And but again, there's well-meaning Christian researchers out there who insist on this. And in my opinion, I'll go toe-to-toe with them. I've been to the debris field. I have a piece of the wreckage. We dug it out. We're the only film crew in history ever to show the piece of metal coming out of the ground. It was buried about 8 inches, been down there for 70 years. And I've had metallurgists look at it. It's folded in on itself. And it was exposed to some very traumatic high heat, like a crash, and it's a skip site. The craft comes in like this. It hits the ground. Part of it disintegrates. That's where Marcel Sr. saw, and Mac Brazel, the rancher who took Jesse Marcel Sr. out of a debris field. But the craft goes in over 17 miles, and that's where the bodies and the craft are recovered. We have a deathbed confession from Walter G. Haught. It's in the film. You can go online and read it for yourself. It was opened only after his demise because he didn't want to, he was military and all this other stuff. And he basically states on the record that he was taken to Hangar 84. We went into Hangar 84. We filmed in Hangar 84, which for me was like, you know, I've seen this since I was a kid, since I was 16, 17 years old, and watched documentaries on the Roswell crash. And they're talking about Hangar 84. Here I am standing in Hangar 84 filming. I mean, I just started laughing. I couldn't even believe it. Thank you, Jesus. But Walter G. Hott states on the record that the craft, which is about 20 feet in diameter, was there in Hangar 84, and the bodies were under a tarp. So who do we believe? I mean, how many people need to come forward before we realize that this cover-up has gone on literally for decades? And this is where the back engineering starts. This is where the secret government stuff starts. The black ops starts. This is Area 51. This is Right Pat. And this is why the only way to get to the bottom of it, in my opinion, is to do what I say. You have President Trump write an executive order. You send out the military. No nonsense. No nonsense. You know, we are taking over this base. We are taking over Right Pat. We are taking over Area 51. It's the only way you're ever going to get to the bottom of it. And then they can reveal all this stuff to the American people. Here's the problem. And this is why the obfuscation. How will the American people react if they really see hard evidence? And this is where the whole this is why I do what I do, folks. Because if that information is released and they show the craft and the bodies and all this stuff, right? How many Christians will lose their faith? How many? It'll usurp the Christian worldview. See, we were seated here by advanced race of extraterrestrials. See where it's going? This is why it's the coming great deception. This is why, in my opinion, they have not released the information. And it's obfuscate, obfuscate, obfuscate. Nothing to see here. Oh, you're wearing a tinfoil hat. You're this, you're that. You're a conspiracy theorist. Stop name calling it. And just deal with Roswell, deal with what's at Area 51, deal with what's at Right Pat.
Amen. Well, LA, we could keep going time and time again for a long time discussing the need for Christians to really wake up to what is going on in the world around us. We appreciate your time so much. And for those watching, you can find out more. You need to find out more in the Rungs of Disclosure, written by none other than our very own L.A. Marzulli, who we appreciate your time so much. We know you're on vacation, and you took this time to come and just react with us about these increasing disclosures about what is going on, not from the fringe, not from the tinfoil hat, but from the center of government on the largest platforms in the world. They are talking about it, and it's time for the church to wake up and start talking about it as well.
Amen.
Absolutely. LA, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me on. God bless you.